The wind at 25,000 feet does not howl. It screams. On October 14, 1943, high above a sky the color of cold steel, a young tail gunner named Staff Sergeant Daniel Danny Mercer kneels inside the narrow glass tail of his B-17. The world behind him is a spinning blur of contrails and sunlight, and somewhere in that blur, death is closing fast. He braces his boots against the ribbed aluminum frame and leans into the twin .50 caliber machine guns mounted before him. Each weapon weighs nearly as much as his younger brother back home. The aircraft shudders as flak bursts bloom like black flowers across the formation. Over the intercom, voices crackle, tight, controlled, pretending not to be afraid. Bandits, 6 o'clock low. Danny squints through his ring and bead sight. 2 simple pieces of metal. No glass. No assistance. Just instinct and guesswork. Somewhere behind him, a German fighter is lining up the easiest shot in aerial warfare, the rear attack. The deadliest angle. The one they all fear. He waits. A dark shape grows in his sight. A Focke-Wulf, coming in steady, nose flashing in the sun. Danny pulls the triggers. The guns thunder. The recoil punches his shoulders. Tracers streak outward, bright orange lines against the pale sky. They pass harmlessly behind the fighter. The German cannons answer. 20mm shells tear through the tail. Plexiglass explodes inward. A control cable snaps like a whip. The aircraft lurches. This scene repeats itself dozens of times across the formation that day. Hundreds of bombers, deep over enemy territory, no long-range escort to shield them. By nightfall, too many won't return. Too many gunners will have fired thousands of rounds at enemies they could barely see, using sights designed for a different war. After the mission, Danny sits alone on an ammunition crate, oxygen mask hanging around his neck. His gloves are stiff with frozen sweat. He cannot shake the image of his tracers missing. Not by inches. By yards. He replays it in his mind. The fighter. The angle. The delay between what he saw and where his bullets went. It wasn't courage he lacked. It wasn't will. It was information. The ring and bead sight gave him a single, narrow view. A tiny window into a sky that was constantly shifting. He had to estimate speed, distance, angle, deflection, all while oxygen-starved and under fire. Even expert gunners struggled to hit 10% of what they shot at. In real combat, it was worse. The bombers were called flying fortresses. But fortresses weren't meant to guess. That night, long after the engines cool and the ground crews drift toward sleep, Danny climbs back into the tail. He brings a flashlight and his small notebook. He studies the guns, the mount, the glass. He moves his head left, right, forward, back. He notices something simple. When he fires, he can't see where the tracers go without shifting his focus away from the target. By the time he corrects, the fighter is already firing. He's always reacting too late. He thinks of the mirrors in the barber shop back home, how one reflection shows another, and another, until you can see behind yourself. What if he could see his tracers without losing sight of the enemy? The idea feels almost foolish. He is no engineer. He left school at 17. But he knows machinery. He knows alignment. And he knows what it feels like to miss. Over the next few nights, Danny sketches a concept. Small angled mirrors mounted near the gun housing. Not large enough to block his view. Just enough to reflect the path of his tracers into his peripheral vision. Not to replace the sight, but to augment it. He doesn't need a complicated computing system. He just needs feedback. He shares the idea quietly with a maintenance sergeant named Carl Hensley, a former auto mechanic who has seen enough wrecked bombers to last a lifetime. Carl studies the drawing in silence. "You know they'll skin us alive if they catch this," Carl says. Danny nods. "They're skinning us alive now." They work after midnight in the maintenance hangar, scavenging what they can. A cracked navigation mirror from a scrapped aircraft. A piece of polished plexiglass. Aluminum brackets bent and shaped by hand. They keep it simple. Adjustable. Removable if needed. By dawn, the tail of Danny's B-17 looks almost the same. Only a trained eye would notice the small mirror angles near the gun mount. On the next mission, the air is as brutal as ever. Flak. Fighters. Smoke. 6 o'clock high. Danny swings the guns upward. Through his sight, the enemy fighter grows larger. He fires a short burst. For the first time, he sees it. In the angled mirror, he catches the reflection of his tracers streaking behind the target. Instantly, without lifting his eye from the sight, he adjusts. Leads more. Fires again. The tracers and the fighter intersect. A flash. Smoke. The German aircraft breaks away, trailing flame. Danny doesn't cheer. He doesn't shout. He simply exhales. It wasn't luck. Over the next missions, something changes. He is no longer blind between trigger pulls. He walks his fire in. His bursts grow shorter, more controlled. His ammunition lasts longer. He begins to anticipate rather than react. Other gunners notice. They ask questions in the mess hall. They peer into his tail position before takeoff. Word spreads through the group. Some call it reckless tinkering. Others call it common sense. The officers call it unauthorized modification. One afternoon, an armament officer climbs into the tail and studies the mirrors with tight lips. "You can't just alter equipment," he says sharply. "There are procedures. Testing. Approval." Danny doesn't argue. He simply offers the gun camera footage. The film is reviewed. Frame by frame. It shows something rare, tracers converging quickly. Corrections happening in real time. Fewer wasted rounds. More fighters breaking off early. The numbers begin to tell a story no regulation can silence. Within weeks, more tails carry similar mirror setups. Some refined. Some crude. The idea spreads not through official memos, but through survival. Enemy tactics begin to shift. Rear attacks grow riskier. Fighters hesitate longer before committing. Hesitation in aerial combat can mean everything. Losses do not vanish. War never becomes safe. But something measurable changes. Crews start coming home who might not have. Bombers land with holes, but intact tails. Danny keeps flying. He doesn't think about innovation. He thinks about the next fighter. The next burst. The next correction. His world remains a cramped glass bubble at the back of a trembling aircraft. Months later, during a mission over central Germany, his bomber takes heavy damage. Engines burn. The formation scatters. He fires until his guns run dry, mirrors vibrating with each burst. The aircraft barely limps back across the channel. On the ground, exhausted, he rests his head against the aluminum skin of the plane. He never intended to change doctrine. He only wanted to see where his bullets were going. After the war, improvements in gun sights become standard. Reflector systems. Gyroscopic aids. Better feedback for the gunner. Engineers refine what desperate airmen improvised. The concept, give the shooter real-time information, becomes foundational. But Danny returns home quietly. Marries. Works with his hands. Raises children who know him as steady and calm, not as the man who once stared down fighters at 5 miles above the earth. Decades later, at a reunion on an old airfield now turned memorial, another veteran approaches him. A former tail gunner from a neighboring squadron. "I heard about those mirrors," the man says. "We tried something similar after seeing yours. I think it's why I'm here." Danny shrugs, uncomfortable with praise. "We were all just trying to get home," he replies. But that's not entirely true. Many were trying to get home. Few were willing to question the tools meant to keep them alive. Fewer still risked reprimand to change them. Innovation in war is rarely born in clean laboratories. It is born in freezing tail sections. In frustration. In the refusal to accept that 8% is good enough when lives hang in the balance. High above Germany in 1943, the sky belonged to those who could adapt fastest. Not just pilots. Not just generals. But kneeling gunners who looked at a flawed system and decided it could be better. In the end, the mirrors were small. The brackets simple. The materials scavenged. But sometimes, survival hinges on seeing just a little more clearly than you did the day before. And sometimes, the difference between a statistic and a homecoming is nothing more than a better way to look at the sky.